There are many reasons to visit the Tuileries Gardens in Paris, France. The gardens are near both the Louvre and the Musée d'Orsay on the north side of the Seine, so you may just find yourself there without exactly knowing it. And if you are museum going, both the Jeu du Paume, the Museum for Modern Photography, and the Musée de l'Orangerie, the location of 8 large, wonderful water lily murals by Claude Monet, are on the grounds of the Tuileries. Indeed, one should visit the Tuileries for the art. The gardens are a playground for public sculpture, where 80 works are scattered throughout the park, many bunched near the gateways providing access. In itself worth the visit, a bronze of Auguste Rodin's The Kiss is one of 4 works by Rodin in the gardens. When entering the Tuileries, you might find yourself walking through Napoleon's Arc de Triomphe du Carrousel, begun at the same time as the monumental Arc de Triomphe at the far end of the Champs-Élysées. And, if you were to look up, onto the coffered barrel vaulting of the main arch, you would see a bas-relief depicting the emperor's military and diplomatic triumphs. After passing through, you're at the southeast end of the Tuileries with your back to the Louvre looking toward the Grand Bassin, down the Grande Allée du Jardin des Tuileries, facing the Place de la Concorde and the Luxor obelisk erected in 1836. Perhaps you are smart, or just lucky, and spring is turning to summer. The trees are leafing out, and the gardens are manicured and the flowers in bloom. And you come in the morning, when the air is cool and there are not as many people. Even on a clear, cool morning, you would not see the Italian gardens first created by Catherine de' Medici in the 16th century. Nothing remains of the fountains of Henry IV, and the mulberry trees planted by the king in hopes of starting a silk industry in France. They too are long gone, as are the exotic animals of Louis XIII and the formal gardens of the Bourbon dynasty. We need history to see these things. And only history can show us the Tuileries Palace, planned first by Catherine de' Medici, finished by the architect Louis le Vau in the 17th century, the residence of French kings and emperors from Henry IV to Louis Napoleon, until it was mostly destroyed in a fire set by Bergeret, commander of the Paris Commune, on May 23, 1871. Using petroleum, tar, and turpentine, everything burned but the walls, Bergeret claiming, quote, "The last vestiges of royalty have just disappeared. I wish that the same may befall all the public buildings of Paris," end quote. The charred walls of the palace stood for a decade, the remaining bones of a flayed corpse, before being removed and taken away. Select areas of the gardens were first opened to the public at the beginning of the 17th century. In 1667, the entire grounds became accessible, and the Tuileries was the first royal garden open to the public. What we see today is based upon the design of landscape architect André Le Nôtre, best remembered for his gardens at Versailles, who, before working in Versailles, redesigned the Tuileries Gardens for Louis XIV in the second half of the 17th century. Le Nôtre created the long central avenue, the Grande Allée du Jardin des Tuileries, also called the Central Way, which integrates the garden within the X historique, a geographic line connecting the Louvre, the Tuileries, the Place de la Concorde with the Champs-Élysées and the Arc de Triomphe. Le Nôtre balanced the central way with 2 flanking walkways, one on each side, crossed by others to create compartments into which were placed large ornamental ponds with fountains, planting areas for trees and beds for flowers. Le Nôtre built elevated terraces on both sides of the garden, the Terrasse du Bord de la Our, the area nearest the river, and the Terrasse des Feuillants, which separated the royal garden from an old Benedictine convent, where today you will find shops and restaurants, an area used for outdoor events including the Fête des Tuileries and the Tuileries Christmas Market. In the 19th century, during the reign of Louis Napoleon, and in conjunction with the grand reconstruction of the city ordered by the emperor and superintended by Baron Haussmann, a time when Paris was transformed from a medieval city to a modern metropolis, the Tuileries also underwent yet another set of major changes. Not everyone was happy with the changes made to the medieval city. The last lines of Baudelaire's poem The Swan read, quote, Paris changes, but in sadness like mine nothing stirs. New buildings, old neighborhoods turn to allegory, and memories weigh more than stone. Haussmann's plans envisioned an international city, with new broad boulevards and walkways lined with trees, new apartment buildings and railroad stations, and, of course, the Paris Opera, then the largest theater in the world. The reconstruction also included the building of other large public parks around the city of Paris, including the Bois de Boulogne to the west, situated in the loop formed by the Seine turning northward and through the city, now seen. In the Tuileries, the grounds were enlarged and new breeds of exotic plants and flowers were added. The two pavilions were constructed, what are now the Jeu du Paume and l'Orangerie, originally as a tennis court, a game more like handball, and a type of greenhouse for plants and for the storage of the citrus trees of the Tuileries during winter. The west entrance was redesigned, as we see in this photograph, with arched, sloping walkways encircling a new entrance gate. New contemporary statues were purchased and placed throughout the grounds. Those by Rodin date to the 1880s and 90s. His figure of the Shade was erected on the west terrace near l'Orangerie. The Tuileries was now, and at once, a large inner-city pedestrian park, a magnificent flower garden, and a place for the display of art and French culture. Indeed, as these fashion plates from an earlier period make evident, the environs of the Tuileries became a place for the display of oneself, in the costumes of the age, interacting with others, on display, as it were, a spectacle that in Monticelli's painting of A Fête in the Tuileries likens the figures shown to the beauties of nature on display in the gardens. It is interesting to consider the bringing together of the cult of nature and the natural, developed from the 18th century cult of sensibility, and which propelled the advent of garden culture and the prominence of gardens, including public and private gardens, with the growing distinctions made between public and private life in the second half of the 19th century. Of the three major arenas of public life, the cafe, the theater, and the pedestrian park, it was thought that the park brought together most definitively features of both qualities associated with nature, to which we respond, it is said, instinctively, and culture or nurture, which is learned, manufactured, and theatrical, and thus somewhat artificial. The 19th century witnessed what has been called the birth of public life, which was distinguished from the private life of the home and the family. This is a complex history, a phenomenon that developed over time, and cannot be fully addressed in this presentation. However, an interesting and important aspect of this distinction, the attention given to children and childhood, provides a link between the two realms of public and private. Unlike the cafe, the theater, even the museum, which were inappropriate to children or beyond the scope of childhood, the public gardens of Paris were places where children were welcome, and together with adults exist, act, and thrive in the public sphere. The Tuileries Gardens were, in the second half of the 19th century, like other large parks in cities such as Central Park or Birkenhead in England, Washington Park in Chicago, one of the great arenas for the spectacle of public life in modernity. It is no surprise the gardens of the Tuileries and their environs became one of the principal subjects in late 19th century painting. It was at the center of Paris, the place for festivals, for fireworks, for concerts and parades, for walking, with quiet, more secluded areas for contemplation and reverie, for friends to meet, socializing, and for children to run and play. It would be rewarding to consider the image of the Tuileries in paintings from the period in light of these issues. Perhaps there is scholarship addressing the matter. I'm not sure. But I think much could be said regarding the image of the child and of childhood by looking closely at paintings representing parks in the context of distinctions between public and private life. The great painter of the Tuileries, I think, at least in the minds of many art historians, is Camille Pissarro, the Impressionist landscape painter. In December 1898, Pissarro wrote from Paris that he had, quote, engaged an apartment at 204 Rue de Rivoli, opposite the Tuileries, with a superb view of the garden, the Louvre to the left, in the background the houses on the quay behind the trees, to the right the Dôme des Invalides and the steeples of St. Clotilde behind clumps of chestnut trees. It's very beautiful. I shall have a fine series to paint, end quote. During the following winter and spring he painted 8 cityscapes looking toward the Louvre, and 6 of the Tuileries gardens with Santa Clotilde in the background. In all, he painted perhaps as many as 28 paintings featuring the Tuileries. Like Monet and other Impressionist painters, Pissarro often painted a subject in series. Here we see several paintings by the artist representing one of the new boulevards in Paris, the Rue Montmartre, on a large hill in a northern district of Paris, a center for the arts and entertainment, where many painters had studios, including Pissarro. In works depicting the Tuileries gardens, like those featuring Montmartre, Pissarro also depicts the park in different seasons of the year, at different times of day, in different weather conditions, capturing the various and varying effects of light and color, different facets of the same object that give to the image a particular character and personality. Seen together, the subject of the Tuileries becomes musical, presenting variations on a theme. It will never rain roses, as the novelist George Eliot has said. When we want to have more roses, we must plant more trees. But we will always have Paris, and the Tuileries has seen over 400 springtimes, and the figures of Rodin's The Kiss are there waiting for you.